I put a link in the description to a video that has a Marine asking why there's a problem, why he's giving his opinion, why he thinks there's a problem with recruiting. There are Marines involved with digital crimes who are fighting forensics, state police, and Weathersfield police, and the Britain Superior Court. They switch names, forge names. They have World Trade Center predicate acts with Channel 361 News. There are also Air Force people involved. These are also their campuses, and they have the same intelligence families involved with my area and with my street in parallel to it through time. And they lie about what they think when they hear people speaking about others' names. They brought it up. They make this. They're doing this every year since I was a kid, but they're doing it every year since the World Trade Center attack, intercities. They hid what I recorded them doing with what they recorded themselves doing with Robert Rodriguez. I didn't respond to him both of the times he was on my. The only time I ever saw him on my street. Second time he goes, remember that girl you saw me walking by with last time? She's dead. I didn't even respond. In other words, untimely death. Even if it was made up. There's one at Trinity College. Even that was made up too. There was one years ago, and those same people involved with that intercities were involved with that other house that was involved with a whole bunch of other ways before and after it. And then right there, when they were making a confession about the other untimely death, connected to the other untimely death, a whole bunch of police forging and switching names. Eastern States Narcotics Drug Task Force has many tied to a name, Dillon, a Kevin Dillon, and people at Hartford Hospital involved with Parks and Rec, also with Marines. People next to WTNH, also involved with predicate acts with them. World Trade Center predicate acts. It's worse than just interstates. These are people with Washington, D.C., with a whole bunch of ties, directly and indirectly, to Mike Pandolf, his neighbors, and his roles with crimes at their corner, even if they were made up by people involved planting and changing evidences. Fake conversations with me at the Weathersfield police station when I was a kid and I was an adult. Marines are involved with that. Please get me off the fake conversations with WFSB. And please have people stop using their differences to pretend things are debatable and focus on the predicate acts of WFSB to actually be the fake conversations with themselves and with others, and about the World Trade Center attack. And while I caught them forcing a principal child abuser, and while I still have a response from the campus, and while they're recording much each year, there's a whole bunch of other stuff tied to it. I put it around, they know they're in the background changing and faking things. In other words, who's this officer? Where's this officer Poison? Keep him off the away from the kids. Get him on paper too. There are all kinds of digital crime acts and methods and wire crime acts and methods tied to these Weathersfield police that attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid, now as an adult. They have roles with crimes with people with the Saudi attackers and in Connecticut campuses roles with Saudi. In other words, and it's nothing against Saudi. Every country's got collusions with a hyper foreign. A whole bunch of different countries involved with the names at the World Trade Center in New York City, involved with Washington, D.C. corruption and Weathersfield campuses and the town offices and the community center. I only saw Ray Clo and Joe DeMoro there real quick, 1 second. And that was them communicating as was confirmed non-verbally. I never had a word of conversation with Kevin Dillon. He recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed his collusions with them. And people with the name Domain. Right when I walk in the room, Domain comes running off the stage. That was like one of the only times I ever saw him off campus. They're trying to put fake except at his house one time. A bunch of people involved with sequence shifts with him and a John Maiano, involved with a Brian Silver. Also was one of the ones with their kids, involved with women judges too, black and white women judges with some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, Italian theme, identity theft, intercultural and intracultural. They have Ireland team. They have a Frankie Reese. They sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm this. Try to take pictures of people. In other words, make it look like fake. The highball came first, and was all recorded with that. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and Weathersfield Police have a Frankie Reese, also with Whiting forensics people involved with a Clinton Corrections Facility and people with the state corrections offices and the state judicial branch offices involved with sexual and medical offenders, years leaders of kids first forced, years apart. And then, in other words, Hartford Hospital has a whole bunch of roles with people with all kinds of drugs, and then they're over here. In other words, they're not against the Marines. The Marines aren't against drugs, just if it's not for their rat bags. In other words, their criminally foreign influence takes on American history too. You guys have our founders' words replaced. You guys aren't allowing people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, or it would have brought up how he was counter extorted. You guys would have appreciated the difference between president and chief. In other words. And then, in other words, you should have respect for the soldiers under you and get them on paper real fast, the Wethersfield police. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. Get me off the fake conversation with the Mendez police there at the Wethersfield police station. He's one of the ones involved with people with the name Tomorrow, and Colo involved with them for the police, also with the name Scalora. And these police forge and switch names. They have a whole bunch of falsified police reports with the same arrest. They put arrays of falsified police reports with the same arrest as one of the predicate acts methods they use, with the switching names and switching sequences. These are also people with Connecticut cases, all sides of criminal and civil cases. The positions with the court, their family members, other natures are conjunctions to them. Even victims advocates increasingly involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and people with the state capitol and next to it increasingly. I never had a class, never saw him around school, a Chet Casper. He's trying to pretend other, increasingly with people from my I never saw him on my grammar school. Increasingly, people from my grammar school have roles with body dumping spots, also involved with the Marines. All kinds of wire crime acts and methods. Then you catch them, they try to call you back and pretend like you're a friend they were talking to. I never tried. That's why I never even tried to contact them. The Marines have roles with a line of people that tried to contact me, try to make it, or just time where I was going to meet, make it look like I knew them, like with the Air Force kid, Paul Kelly. Increasingly involved with people all along Ridge Road, also with a modern pastry and Mazzucato Bakery, involved with a John Maiano, involved with sequence chefs, and people involved with predicate acts and World Trade Center predicate acts. And he's in the background with investigations. Investigators haven't been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought through time. Whole bunch of people involved with Connecticut's, New Britain's Superior Court and Hartford's Superior Court and their families and intimate ties. Involved with all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders, also that the Marines have involvements with. In other words, and then they're going to speak about mental health. You have more scams at Hartford Hospital with just a few dozen people than there are streets in Hartford and Wethersfield together. In other words, CT must break, but they recede. No, Connecticut might, in other words, it's more probable that Connecticut, even if it's not real, Connecticut might be cipher that Connecticut is a cherry tree. And he chopped it down. He had to come here with James Madison's plan to counter extort, rather. The breaching method already had everyone tortured, fact, treatment, nature, extorted, and fact, treatment, nature, enslaved, therefore physically. And it's still manifest when you guys pretend it's debatable that it was entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, and there were more than 13 colonies. James Madison's plan, you guys have other communicated for it, for yourselves, and for Americans, and for the world. Then our founders communicated for themselves. They declassified why and how they didn't have free speech. Nature itself shows that. Why is there a witch trials place next to Webb House? Why is Webb House now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum? And still, then and now, they still have other communicated than James Madison communicated to have communicated for himself and for himself and for the founders behind him and his plan, who then they went and got George Washington to agree to help them and to use that plan. George Washington, some retired English general, and people still tied to him, didn't have means to counter those internationally entrenched laws and collusion /S with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists originally and still. The World Trade Center attack was effectively pulled off to show you guys how to read the laws and the Constitution on the bridge and pretend on the screen itself. and then through apparent in real motivations to hide behind, and through the breaching method. In other words, they have all kinds of natures of organized crime that are manifest with the World Trade Center and their roles with the names involved. Increasingly, people tie to the name O'Brien and King and their roles and their neighbors, roles of all kinds, and people with the O'Brien and Violet and Kalvinskis. In other words, these are some black KKK Confederate team pretending, with the interbranch pretending passions and emotions when people go to the courts each day. All kinds of scams against due process. It's not by accident. They're measured and maintained. They can't make the subject treatment about due process for Americans. How are they going to make it proper for foreigners? In other words, every modern country's A through Z have been systems tactical ulterior from the human species body of individual bodies, with all group differences, therefore all names, being generated, but being demonstrated to by what's generating us, because it's also generating other completely different species bodies. And they are distinct from our own, but they're also non-distinct. And they are simultaneous, but we are shown need scientifically to discern a distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is not us, it is not them, but it is all things anyway. Many pray, Bach sings. In other words, there's a difference between peace and hyper peace too. At countries A through Z, worse than criminal incompetence as the suits and ties, counters, and exceptions. They use words like diplomacy, criminally foreign influenced, criminal insidiousness natures of diplomacy. These are little keywords they have. The breaching method handed them extremism. Get down or gather around. Who disbelieves? All rise. Get them on paper, one name and sequence into Branch, Connecticut. Now. Fake branches, bow. And Weathersfield, please, too. Don't make it worse.